finally done with Rotten Tomatoes? Are people finally done with the Rotten Tomatoes establishment as more and more movies continue flopping despite getting a certified fresh score on Rotten Tomatoes? Yes, those rare movies that the critics love and people actually love, but those movies are getting more and more thinner as the public reception of Rotten Tomatoes continues to falter. It seems that people are getting sick of Rotten Tomatoes. And we have lots of things here. Black Widow is being certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. But does anyone really care if Black Widow is certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes? This is the site that continuously lies and will defend garbage movies like Cuties and Captain Marvel and Batwoman, which is a TV show, not a movie, but you get the point. You get the point about Rotten Tomatoes and the whys and whys and whys. They think that they can tell you which movies are good or bad, but they make up terrible and abysmal reasons why movies are bad. We're going to go over many examples of movies that were treated pretty much unfairly by Rotten Tomatoes for absolutely stupid reasons. And a lot of people still trust Rotten Tomatoes, which I can understand. Some people can still trust them, especially when it comes to like actual bad movies. But there's lots of actual good movies that were absolutely hated and completely smeared by these quote-unquote critics. Okay, now let's go over all the reasons why Rotten Tomatoes is starting to die. Number one, overpraisal of Disney. The fact that Disney movies continue to get overpraised by Rotten Tomatoes, and people can say, but Disney movies are actually good. Yeah, you can say that as an excuse, but it doesn't make up for the absolutely hatred of movies like Mulan and Cruella. There is a lot of people who didn't like the Cruella movie and said it wasn't anything special. But according to Rotten Tomatoes, and especially the certified scores, Cruella has a 97% on a certified score and a absolutely, and a score of 72% by the critics. How does Cruella have a 72%? Well, that's because Rotten Tomatoes loved the movie so much that they practically went out and defended the movie. Just look at the movie. If you just search it up on Google, look up A Quiet Place Part 2 and Godzilla vs. Kong. A lot of people really love The Quiet Place Part 2. It has a higher score on IMDb and a higher score on Metacritic. I'm not really about Godzilla vs. Kong. I think that score should have been around like 80 to 85%. But again, that's how the Rotten Tomatoes rating scores are completely abysmal and just terrible ever since they changed it to protect Captain Marvel. And anyone who say they don't go around and protect Captain Marvel, they must be lying to themselves, because that's what they basically did. They basically did to protect Captain Marvel, which was absolutely hilarious as all. They really went to protect Disney, which is what they basically do now. Rotten Tomatoes is basically a site that goes around and covers for Disney's ass. That's why you never really see Disney movies get bad reviews. The last Disney movie to get bad reviews was Artemis Fowl, which again, nobody liked Artemis Fowl, so that doesn't really count. That means the last real Disney movie to get bad reviews, and I don't know the reasons of the Alien and Fat movie, and I'm not talking about any movies that Fox made, was Murders and Mysteries of Evil and Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker. I actually forgot that movie existed, even though it made $1 billion at the box office. But Rotten Tomatoes was responsible for making movies like Captain Marvel and Aladdin remake and Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker passing $1 billion. You can really blame them and the establishment that goes around and protects any Disney movie because Disney can do nothing wrong. That is the narrative spun by every Disney fanboy. Every Disney fanboy essentially says that Disney can do nothing wrong and that Disney is a perfect company. Yeah, such a perfect company that they're willing to silence any criticism of their movies. They're willing to silence any criticism of the movies as much as possible. I can't wait to see when Black Widow comes out. I don't think Black Widow will be a bad movie, but I can't really see what the reactions to Black Widow comes out. Besides the one criticism which is kind of universal, as the movie came out too late. But I don't really care. I don't really care if the movie was quote unquote too late. I just want to enjoy a movie. For example, those water movies that we consider too late. but they were still enjoyable as well. For example, but most of the time they suck. AKA Independence Day Resurgence. That movie that exists. Okay, but they just delayed the movie because of COVID-19. I don't think the movie is quote unquote too late to be out in theaters. Is maybe you should tell that to the global pandemic that went on and tell them to never happen again. But again, Rotten Tomatoes basically goes out and covers for Disney. That's what they have been doing for the longest time. Let's look at Mulan. Mulan has good reviews by the critics, but everybody hated that movie, outside of course the Disney fanboys, who called it a masterpiece, of course, and said that Mulan is an underrated classic. Yeah, such an underrated classic, because it's such an underrated classic. Yeah, we all know. Same thing, and then we have, of course, movies that Rotten Tomatoes loves, but nobody cares about them. Okay, the most recent example of this is In the Heights. Nobody gave a crap about In the Heights, and it's set to lose $50+ million. Think about that. $50+ million lost on In the Heights, another unnecessary musical that nobody wanted. But of course, Rotten Tomatoes kept saying it was a masterpiece. They kept saying, oh my god, you have to see this In the Heights movie. It's such a masterpiece. But people didn't give a fuck. People didn't give a crap about seeing In the Heights. And then, of course, all the articles came out about how people are racist for not seeing In the Heights because people chose not to see bad movies at the box office. And and the movie severely underperformed on HBO Max as well. It was all around the board. People just didn't care about the movie. And when will Rotten Tomatoes ever admit that? People just didn't care. People didn't want to see In the Heights. People didn't care for In the Heights at all. It was nothing but a box office failure. Nothing but a box office flop. It is nothing but a box office failure and a box office flop, way in and way out. And yeah, this is absolutely insane. But of course, In the Heights is going to become a box office failure. And of course, the critics are going to cry racism every single time because they can't admit that people didn't like the movie. And it's not the greatest movie. Booksmart came out. Nobody gave a crap about Booksmart. It flopped. And people forgot about it. Except for the critics trying to remind you it's a cult classic. Yes, it's a cult classic that everybody forgot about it. Everybody forgot about it because it's such a cult classic. Such a cult classic that everybody forgot about. That's not a cult classic. That's just another forgotten movie that came out in a year of already a lot of much better movies to watch. Why would I want to watch that movie if I can watch much better movies like Alita, Joker, Parasite, or even Godzilla King of the Monsters or Midway, without far better than Booksmart, which basically the critics gave a 10 out of 10 because the lead character was gay. That's the reason why they loved that movie. Not because of the plot, not because the movie was good, but because the characters were gay, which is absolutely stupid. And so not be a reason why a movie is good. That's because the main characters are gay, doesn't mean a movie is good. It has to have a good storyline, and especially if it's considered a comedy, it has to have good jokes. If the jokes aren't funny, people are not going to want to see it. Which really proved it as a movie called Playing with Fire, where the critics hated for saying, oh, it's not funny at all, made more money at the box office, and they were saying the movie was going to flop because, oh, the movie's not funny. It isn't in a Booksmart. It isn't like Booksmart, so it's not funny. And it just really sold. Nobody wanted to see it. But of course, according to Rotten Tomatoes, people who don't like movies like In the Heights, or people don't go watch In the Heights, are trolls. Oh yes, that's the next excuse they use. They got rid of the website because they were scared of quote unquote trolls. Yep. Apparently not liking a movie makes you a troll. Not liking if you don't like Captain Marvel, well, you're a troll. If you don't like, What's His Face, for example, if you have an unpopular opinion, of course that's a common excuse they'll use For example, I don't like The Incredibles. I never will like The Incredibles. I don't like its sequel either. I watched the sequel because I wanted to see if if it was actually a good movie and how it was right. It was not a good movie. The Incredibles 1 and 2 are probably some of my least favorite animated movies of all time, especially Pixar movies. But of course, that's my opinion. The general consensus on The Incredibles is that it's a masterpiece. I don't think it's a masterpiece, and I don't think, in my opinion, it's a masterpiece, but everybody else does. But Rotten Tomatoes, if we don't call Captain Marvel a masterpiece, then you're a troll. If you don't praise Captain Marvel for being a great feminist movie and call it garbage like it rightfully is, then you are a troll. Same thing with any Disney movie of the year, okay? Or movies like Cuties. Oh, it's just the right-wing trolls who don't like Cutie. Yeah, normal everyday people don't like Cuties. And yeah, that's the next one. They gave movies like Cuties good scores. Yes, Cuties apparently has a higher score than movies like Forrest Gump, Zack Snyder's Justice League. Yes, Zack Snyder's Justice League is considered worse by Rotten Tomatoes. Despite everybody liking Zack Snyder's Justice League, I have not seen it yet, but I'm going to get it on Blu-ray, and it's definitely a movie that I'm going to like, because I like the original Justice League, and that is the original cover of Justice League, which will definitely be much better than the current one that we have. It will probably be in like my top 10 films of all time. Wouldn't be surprised after my watching of it. Of course, I'm going to get it when it comes out on Blu-ray, because I'm not paying for overpriced HBO Max ever in my life. But if you just look at the score of Cuties, it has an 88%. It is 16% on Rotten Tomatoes. Heck, I would rather watch a movie like the Emoji Movie than ever watch Cuties. At least the Emoji Movie would have some enjoyment out of it. I think Cuties would have gotten a 0%. But the fact that it has a 88% certified fresh score is absolute proof that Rotten Tomatoes is a terrible site. Absolute proof that Rotten Tomatoes is a terrible site, and they called it a masterpiece. They called it a masterpiece. They said it was one of the best movies of the year. And it was even on the Oscars short list of well. And we have a similar movie that was similar to Cuties called Music, and again, the critics actually hated it. Which was actually, they probably learned the lesson from Cuties. Which is a good thing. At least they're starting to learn the lesson against Cuties. After the massive backlash against the reviews of Cuties, which I was a part of and many more people were, but, the fact that they are at least starting to warn the differentiate bad movies from good movies, but the movies that they like, nobody gives a crap. Nobody wants to see. Nobody wants to see In the Heights. All we have to do is take one good look at the box office and see which movies are making money. Which movies are making money. Fast and the Furious 9 versus In the Heights. In the Heights is likely to lose $50 million. Meanwhile, Fast and the Furious 9 is likely to make up to even $100 million. But according to Rotten Tomatoes, F9 is only at 60%. But despite this, the movie's going to make more money. Which actually have a defined budget for F9 now. It's $200 million to $225 million, which means the movie will need to make up around $400 million to $450 million worldwide, which it definitely will make that much money. So Fast 9 will definitely become a success. But despite this movie, again, IMDb has a 5.5. Which again, IMDb hates that movie for some reason. But that's IMDb. IMDb is just completely wacky. They say Captain Marvel was a good movie. And the fact that they gave Last Jedi a pile of trash, that high score. Same as the Star Wars. The Last Jedi has a 93%. Nobody liked The Last Jedi. Nobody freaking liked The Last Jedi. Okay? And, everybody hated that movie. Basically. It is considered the worst Star Wars movie, even by the top 10s. Even by the top 10s, the worst Star Wars movie of all time. But of course, Rotten Tomatoes loved The Last Jedi. They loved that movie. They loved The Last Jedi. They said it was the best Star Wars movie ever. Besides the original trilogy, which are the only movies, I think, have higher scores. But most of the population disagreed. The Last Jedi was the first movie that really proved the evilness and stupidness of Rotten Tomatoes. And now you have movies that are considered certified fresh completely bombing at the box office. In The Heights, Cruella, and Wire, all box office flops. Ironically, one of those movies might actually make money, which is Cruella. Well, and that's if the budget is that low. But according to Rotten Tomatoes, according to Rotten Tomatoes, Star Wars: The Last Jedi is the fourth best Star Wars movie, and according to Rotten Tomatoes, Star Wars Episode 6, 7, The Force Awakens is equal to The Empire Strikes Back. You just can't have a biggest joke of a site themselves, considering The Empire Strikes Back should have a perfect 100 score, saving of Episode 4, New Hope, and the fact that the entire original trilogy is the fact that the sixth entry in the original trilogy, Return of the Jedi, is considered worse than The Last Jedi, proves that Rotten Tomatoes is an absolute joke of a website. Return of the Jedi should be up there with the first two, but no, it is not. It is not because Rotten Tomatoes considers that one to be the worst Star Wars movie, worse than The Last Jedi, and worse than The Force Awakens. That's just the absolute first proof. Now let's look at another movie, Zack Snyder's Justice League. Zack Snyder's Justice League was universally praised by fans of DC. It was universally praised by fans of DC, but according to Rotten Tomatoes, again, if you want to see hypocrisy of Rotten Tomatoes, all we have to do is look at Zack Snyder's Justice League. According to Rotten Tomatoes, Batwoman is better than Zack Snyder's Justice League. Freaking Batwoman. Yes, it's a difference of 1%, but Batwoman apparently is considered better by the standards of Rotten Tomatoes. Zack Snyder's Justice League isn't as worthy as Birds of Prey, as Batwoman, and of course, definitely Captain Marvel, which, according to Rotten Tomatoes, Batwoman is an 84%. An 84%, that's considered a masterpiece, basically. A freaking masterpiece according to Rotten Tomatoes. Okay, compared to Justice League, not the original, the Zack Snyder version that is considered a masterpiece by basically 94% of people consider this movie a good movie. But of course, Rotten Tomatoes would like to disagree with you. They would give Captain Marvel a higher score, even though everybody hated Captain Marvel. And let's not even go over the fact that The Last Jedi has a higher score. The Last Jedi has a freaking higher score than Justice League, Zack Snyder's Justice League. And we even have, of course, Forrest Gump, which has an even lower score. Okay, was it considered one of the greatest movies of all time? Yep, of all time. Forrest Gump. Even by the top 10s, listed as the greatest movie of all time. Same score as Zack Snyder's Justice League, 71%. Even though it should be saying at 98%, 99%, and 100%. No. That's not how Rotten Tomatoes works. Apparently, according to Rotten Tomatoes, the Mulan remake is better, and The Heights is better than, of course, Forrest Gump. This is how I could recommend Rotten Tomatoes to someone here. Biased, yeah. Rotten Tomatoes. They're really telling me why I don't like Rotten Tomatoes. Well, we all know why I don't like Rotten Tomatoes. Rotten Tomatoes is biased. We all know they are biased. Rotten Tomatoes is biased. Okay, that's my next reason I don't like Rotten Tomatoes. Rotten Tomatoes is biased, and people are starting to see that. People are starting to see the biases. Okay, all we have to do is look at any political movie, and if any right-wing movie, if any movie that is right-wing powered political movies, it's instantly a pile of garbage. But any movie, for example, Knock Down the House, that's considered a masterpiece, a perfect 100%. But we don't even have to look for for political movies. Just normal movies. For example, Rambo 5 and Peppermint. Those movies were essentially unfairly treated by biased critics. Especially Peppermint and Rambo 5. Peppermint, I think, sort of got around the 40 to 50%. I think that would be a much more reasonable score. But of course, the critics, of course, gave it a 12%. Oh, it must be such a terrible and garbage movie. It must be like one of the worst movies ever made. It must be like Dragon Ball Evolution, according to Rotten Tomatoes, is a better movie. Yep, even Dragon Ball Evolution is considered better. That's how bad Rotten Tomatoes is. And you know why they hate this movie? Because the movie is racist. That's the only arguments they give of why they hate this movie. The movie's racist. And it's rated in the second review. The movie is racist. That's the reason why it's considered bad. By a quote-unquote top critic, too. A top critic. Or complain about how the movie is too violent. Even though literally the entire franchise would like to disagree with you, called John Wick, the movie's too violent. That's the sad excuses for it. The sad excuses of a review of the movie. And these reviews are just absolutely abysmal on Rotten Tomatoes, which just shows the absolute bias by the critics. But then they'll give a similar movie, if it's woke, an 80 to 90%. And 80-90% is a movie that a woke movie would get. What does for example, a movie like Knives Out? To me, Knives Out was another generic mystery movie. It wasn't really anything special or anything unique. It had a few good jokes here and there, but wasn't really the best mystery movie of all time. But according to, of course, Rotten Tomatoes, it's a perfect movie. 97%. And again, Knives Out never understood the praise for it. I was like, this is just a good movie. It's not a masterpiece. And I think that he's just continue making Knives Out instead of, course, making garbage Star Wars movies that no one's going to want to see. And no, I'm not saying the entire Star Wars franchise is garbage. I love the original trilogy, and I like the prequel trilogy, except for the second movie. I'm more talking about Rian Johnson's trilogy. We do not need Rian Johnson's trilogy, because Rian Johnson's trilogy would suck. It'll probably be the worst Star Wars movies ever made. And that's just saying the truth there. Those would be the worst Star Wars movies ever made, because Rian Johnson should not be in charge of Star Wars. They should not be in charge of Star Wars. He should not be in charge in any capacity of Star Wars. Because what I think was proven by The Last Jedi. But according to Rotten Tomatoes, The Last Jedi is a masterpiece, so we must trust them. Captain Marvel is considered better than Zack Snyder's Justice League. It's just, where do we go from here? It seems that people are finally starting to see through the eyes of Rotten Tomatoes. For example, Zack Snyder's Justice League. For example, Alita. Okay, let's just for the example of Alita. All of the Rotten Tomatoes establishment and the critic establishment were all complaining about how bad Alita was. All complaining about her eyes. That's the big criticism of Alita. It's like a 5-year-old's argument over why a movie's bad. Her eyes are too big. Yep, that's really like the 5-year-old argument to why a movie's bad. Not the plot, not the story, not the characters, her eyes. That's the reason why they hated the movie. And because, of course, the fan base was a bit too right-wing. But, of course, you're not allowed to like Alita, but you have to like Captain Marvel. Or else, if you like Alita, they'll call you a troll, of course, because that's how Rotten Tomatoes works. But if you see here, they're saying that the movie was incomplete. Or blah, 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 blah. Basically. But we all know the real reason I hated the movie. For example, there was one review that said, Alita is a total chaotic mess, and doesn't really describe why the movie sucks. Okay? And some of these are just not really good reviews. Okay? There was one that actually is complaining about the story. But some of these reviews, especially the hit pieces of Alita, that came out weeks and even months after the movie came around, because they didn't expect the movie to have a fan base. They expect the movie to come out and die, just like, of course, movies like Geostorm and stuff, and they didn't expect the movie to have a passionate fan base at all. They expect the movie to even have any fan base. They expected the movie to come out and die, and then people just go watch Captain Marvel and give Captain Marvel a 10 out of 10, just because it's Marvel. That's because it's made by Disney, which is just absolutely insane of Rotten Tomatoes. And this will get the thermometer and audience scores, 61% and 92%. And of course, that's one of the few movies that came out before Rotten Tomatoes altered the scores, so you can get a score. Every Disney movie automatically gets a 95% to 97%. And the score doesn't move ever since then, which is definitely not organic. It definitely is not made by bots. Or you can just look at the movie Sonic. Another movie that the critics were trying to get rid of. The critics were trying to get rid of Sonic. They tried everything in the power by review bombing the movie, and trying to make sure the movie got bad reviews. But most of the people who watched Sonic, with the very rare instances, loved the movie. With very, very rare instances, people loved the Sonic movie. People loved it. It has a 63%. It has a 93%. Of course, that's the garbage verified ratings. But unlike movies like Melissa vs. Evil, this score sounds much more believable than all the other scores because most of the people who watched the movie actually liked it. But of course, the critics are making up the same excuses as the reader. We all know the reason why they hated this movie. Because because the fans got their way. And they still complained about that. They still complained the fact that the fans got their way. The fact that the director listened to the fans. And the third movie is, of course, Joker. We all know they hated Joker. We all know they hated this movie. From here on and here out, okay, Joker currently had 68% Rotten Tomatoes, despite everybody saying the movie was a masterpiece. Even IMDb had an 8.4, which is definitely higher than movies like Captain Marvel. But here you go again. Joker has a lower score than Batwoman, Captain Marvel, and other movies. And it has a 68% Rotten Tomatoes. Why? Because there was a massive review bombing campaign to get this movie to have a lower score so it can't be certified fresh. Because they want to make sure the movie didn't have a certified fresh score. Which is the absolute worst campaign against a movie I've ever seen in a movie. Okay? And here we go. Some of the quote-unquote critical reviews will complain about how the movie's too violent. Even though John Wick, Rambo, and various other R-rated action franchises would like to disagree with you. But again, and of course let's go to the most recent movie, Zack Snyder's Justice League. The absolutely fact that this doesn't have a 90% is absolutely proof that Rotten Tomatoes is messed up. And I think after this movie and Joker, which again is taking two DC movies to finally wake up people to Rotten Tomatoes, it's something that the fans have been wanting to see, and they got it, and it was considered it was a masterpiece. According, I have not seen it, but most of the fans called it a masterpiece, and it likely is a masterpiece as well. But again, the critics didn't like it. 71%. Oh yes, but again, Captain Marvel is considered a better movie because Brie Larson is a is a feminist. So of course it's a better movie. Of course, according to Rotten Tomatoes, Captain Marvel is a better movie. And let's go back to the Captain Marvel versus Alita comparison that they didn't want you to do. Well, according to Rotten Tomatoes, Captain Marvel is better despite both movies featuring a strong, empowered woman in the movie. And one of them actually being a good character that showed a lot of emotion and was actually pretty unlikable compared to a boring frat prank that was terrible. And now let's get to the last one. Charlie's Angels. Yep. The fact that Charlie's Angels does not have like an 18 to 10. The score that Peppermint sort of got was sort of been around Charlie's Angels score. And Charlie's Angels sort of got a 12%. But of course the woke critics, of course, loved Charlie's Angels, which is half of the reviews. Most of the normal critics said, "Stay the hell away from this garbage, and we're not going to watch this. This is a waste of time." But the fact that movies like Midway and Godzilla King of the Monsters and many more better movies are saying that as far low scores as like 20%, but Charlie's Angels are saying that like a 50+%, it's absolutely proof of it. I think people are finally starting to see through Rotten Tomatoes rise. You just can't keep lying to people over and over and over again and expecting people to listen to you over and over and over again. I think people are going to start to listen to online reviewers and actual people online instead of trusting Rotten Tomatoes knows any longer. I think the age of the mainstream critics dictating if a movie will flop or not is over. And it will really be up to what people see on YouTube and how people on YouTube see the movie. If they like it, then it's going to probably be a success. And it was the same thing with actors. Actors don't really sell movies anymore. And of course, it's Keanu Reeves. He's like the only exception to that rule. But except for Keanu Reeves and maybe Chris Pratt, actors don't really sell in movies anymore. They don't really move movies anymore. We had movies that were basically moved by actors, aka every Jim Carrey comedy movie. But, you know, yeah, I think people are getting done with Rotten Tomatoes. Rotten Tomatoes is dying as a site. The absolute ridiculous double standard and biases within the Rotten Tomatoes establishment is just absolute proof that Rotten Tomatoes, I think, as a site, is dying. Goodbye.